Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 115 and 116 of Steven Universe, The Zoo, and that will be all. So, previously on Steven Universe, well, to put simply, Steven kind of screwed up. He had been having strange dreams of a field in Korea that in said field he saw what looked like a pink, gazebo that seemed to be in disrepair and had been there for some time. Upon further investigation, Stephen learned that this building was called a palanquin and was something that was associated with the gems, and yet when Stephen asked the gems about it, they all clammed up. Desperate for answers, Stephen went up going to his dad, and they went up traveling to Korea, where the palanquin was supposed to be, in order to hopefully find answers as to what was going on in Stephen's mind. And upon arriving, they soon discovered why Stephen's been having these dreams. Because it turns out he was seeing through the eyes of a diamond. Specifically, Blue Diamond, who came to Earth to mourn Pink Diamond, and the reason Stephen was seeing the palanquin at all was because the palanquin he was seeing in his dreams used to belong to Pink, and thus that's where Blue was mourning. Unfortunately, when Stephen and Greg just wound up encountering Blue Diamond, they wound up accidentally getting the attention of her Pearl, and so to try and throw them off the scent, Greg let himself be known, and when he actually engaged with Blue Diamond, they wound up finding common ground over their shared losses, as they both lost someone that they held dear, and so Blue decided that since Earth was going to be destroyed by the cluster, as far as she knows anyway, that Greg doesn't deserve to face the same fate, and so she takes Greg and goes back to her palanquin with the intent of taking him off Earth. And while Stephen does try to stop them, sadly he fails, and well, Greg gets taken off planet. At this point, when Stephen relays the information back to the gems, they conclude that Blue Diamond must have taken Greg to the human zoo, and thus after getting themselves all set up in the Ruby's roaming eye ship, the gems manage to make their way to the human zoo, after some bit of shenanigans aboard the ship, and upon arriving they all essentially had to pretend that they fit into their previous roles in order to blend in. Unfortunately, this also meant that Stephen had to pretend to be a human zoo captive, and as a result, as they were touring the zoo, Stephen wound up getting taken away and got sent down to the zoo proper, being stripped of his clothes, being put in a new suit, getting a weird set of earrings, and literally flushed down the drain until he was popped out in a pond, where upon arriving, he soon saw his father as he was getting his hair braided by two other humans, which is where the zoo begins. As the instant Stephen sees Greg, well, he's happy to see him, and Greg is of course happy to see his son. They run to each other, they hug, it's all nice and sweet, and immediately Stephen wants to start getting Greg out of here. But unfortunately, they can't exactly they can't exactly leave the way they came in, as the tunnel that Stephen was flushed down is now sealed up. They can't go back out it. As such, Stephen wonders how the heck they're going to get out of here, but immediately all plans of escape are put on hold because, well, they've got a welcoming committee. Hold on one second. Apologies, dog-related stuff. I had to let Shindy out and back, and I'm probably going to pause again because she's still out there, and I'm trying to keep an ear open. But anyway, like I said, Stephen and Greg actually have a welcoming committee, as, well, I did mention that there were other humans at the zoo. And, well, it's not just these two. It turns out that there is an entire community of humans that's living in the zoo. Happily, I may add. These are actually the descendants of the humans that were captured by the human zoo thousands of years ago, and thus, well, these humans have actually lived and grown up in the zoo. And you can kind of see that reflected in their personalities, as they are very much sheltered, childlike, and just really kind of very simplistic in their wants and desires. They're very much, they know they want for nothing because they really don't feel like they need anything else. This is just paradise to them. They are given food at certain times, they get to play, they get to bask in wildlife, they get to frolic and play in the pond. They're just super happy and friendly and sweet and nice, and oh my god, I hated every second of them. Yeah, I'm just gonna rip that bandit off right now. I didn't like the Zoomans. Like at all. They felt too nice, too sweet, too wholesome. At several points, I wanted to punch them all in their faces. Which is gonna be kind of weird for me, because I'm usually the guy that likes some sweet, wholesome cuteness, but oh sweet mother of God, this was too such and sweet. I could feel myself getting a cavity on this, and at several points, I was thinking to myself, well, more specifically, I was thinking of specific lines from an episode of Bardock Abridged. You know, the ones where he thought about destroying the little Saiyans. I'm just saying, I hated these people. Although in some cases I also kind of respected them, because of their more simplistic mindsets, they also can unintentionally troll someone. Case in point, once the Zoomans are introduced to Steven, yeah, I'm going to call them Zoomans because that's what they're eventually called. Once they're introduced to Steven, they reveal that Greg has actually told them stories about him, and they immediately start quoting the bits to them. Like, they all start chanting, the bits, the bits, the bits. And then when Steven's just staring at them blankly, one guy in the crowd says, go on, say it. I kind of find that, I don't know. I like that an unintentional bit of trolling. It's just kind of funny. It's like they're just the unquenchable masses. Although there is one guy in there who looks depressed for whatever reason. I don't know why. But either way, Steven's glad that they're not that these Zoomans are not a threat. Well, he still kind of wants to get the hell out of here, and thus he thinks that the best way is to find the entrance out. Since there was a door into the zoo, so odds are that if they can find the door on the other side, they can open it up from inside the zoo and find their way out. Although Greg tells Steven that they should probably wait until they go through the routine, as the earrings that all the Zoomans have are connected to an automatic system, which contains a little voice that just tells them how to do their day, when to eat, when to play, when to just stop and smell the roses, and yes, that is literally something they do in the day, when to bathe, and when to go to sleep. And so Steven somewhat reluctantly does kind of go along with it, and while it's clear he's not exactly against what they're doing here, as he does realize that they're all happy and content because they know nothing else in this world, at the same time, it's clearly still odd to him. Which, again, kind of makes sense. It's like looking at a different culture in a strange, kind of twisted way. Because, this is the life for the Zoomans. They know nothing else, and thus they want for nothing else. This is how they've been raised, this is what they're used to, and for them, this is life, and there's nothing really wrong with that. They have no reason to want to get out of the zoo. They have nothing to complain about in the zoo. They're all happy and joyous. Though it's clear that the Zoomans do really like Greg because when bat time comes around, they all are calling for his attention when they all jump into the water, and Greg impresses them all by doing a cannonball because none of them have really known stuff like that. Eventually, though, nighttime, or what counts for nighttime, does come around, and everybody goes to sleep, and so Steven immediately takes advantage of this so that he and Greg can go off and find the exit. And so they eventually do find it, but unfortunately, as Holly Blue said in the last episode, it's a one-way door. They can't open it from inside the zoo, so it's kind of a problem. Although at this point, it's revealed that two of the Zoomans have actually followed Steven and Greg. These are the Zoomans that Steven and Greg initially met upon arriving. They are known as... hold on one second. Sorry, had to look up their names. They are Y6 and J10, Y6 being a boy and J10 being a girl. And basically the pair actually followed Steven and Greg because they thought they were maybe going up to do a new game. But Steven does explain to them that they want to open this door, but, they don't know what a door is. They don't really have no need for them. All they know is that there's a big wall around their cabin, and walls don't open, so why would that... I don't know what a door is. Although J10 does reveal that there is a story passed along among them that one time there was a wall that opened up, and that from it came, and an amethyst came through with it because someone in the zoo was hurt. Although because everything is so joyous in the zoo, they have absolutely no idea what hurt is. As such, Steven assumes that if they can just hurt someone, that'll alert the amethyst to come in and try and help them out, and so Greg kind of lets himself get thrown on the pyre and asks Steven to punch him, which Steven does, and he does hit him pretty hard, but it's not enough to open the doors, and before Steven can do a second attempt, the earrings light up as the voice on them tells everybody in the zoo that it's time for the Choosening. As such, Steven and Greg don't know what it is, but all the other Zoomans are excited for it, so they follow them to where the Choosening is supposed to be. And it turns out all the humans are gathered around this little circle, and they pretty much invite Greg into the circle while telling Steven to stay outside. And it turns out the Choosening is a matchmaking ceremony where two Zoomans are paired up together and are essentially now a couple for life, so to speak. And the instant Greg sees this, he's like, oh, shit. No, and of course, while Steven tries assuring Greg that he's new here, that maybe he won't be picked, the little voice tells him that he is picked as he's immediately paired up with J10, who is actually very happy that she's being paired up with Greg, considering that before she got put into the circle, she said whoever he got chosen with would be very lucky, but, Greg isn't exactly for this, and Y6 does try to urge Greg forward, thinking that he's shy, which again goes back into the unintentional trolling that I actually find endearing among these people. Greg just says, no, I'm not doing this shit, and tells them that that's not how it works on Earth, that on Earth you get to choose who you're with, and that, it's not just something that's forced on you. With Steven even talking about how his parents only got together because they spent time together, grew closer, and thus wanted to be together. And as such, the Zoomans take this to heart and say, oh, well, we can choose who we want to be with. I want to be with Greg. And yeah, that's literally the policy with all of them. Apparently Greg made an impression on all of the Zoomans as they all now want to be paired with him. The only thing is, Greg ain't into that shit. Greg ain't into that, and immediately tells them, look, you all have the right to choose in me, and I am flattered, but I can also choose in none of you, and I don't. And immediately upon saying this, the Zoomans all just break down crying as they realize that this is hurt, and immediately beg Greg to essentially take it back, so to speak. At which point Steven just picks up his dad and runs for it while the Zoomans would chase after them. And while Steven and Greg are able to get away from the Zoomans, well, the Zoomans aren't enough pain, so to speak, for the Amethysts to finally have to go in and do something about it, and so the door opens as the Amethysts start trying to corral the Zoomans and just immediately start comforting them and trying to calm them down. It's actually kind of funny, especially when you see one Amethyst consoling Y6 is like, I'm never gonna choose it again. And the Amethyst is like, oh, sure you will. It's funny. But either way, immediately Greg and Steven realize that this is their ticket out of there as the door is open, but once they try and make a run for it, one Amethyst grabs them and tells them that they're coming with her. And well, that's where that will be all begins, as we see that particular Amethyst essentially bring them to, I'm just gonna call it the Amethyst living quarters, as they bring them in, and all the Amethysts are just gathered there, and they're all just laughing evilly as they look down at Steven and Greg. And sure enough, they've been found out. The Amethysts have figured out that the Crystal Gems Amethyst, she's a fake, as we see her being held in place back in her original form, no longer buff, and so it looks like that she's all in pain as she tells Steven, oh, you wouldn't believe what I've been through. These Amethysts, they're all so great! At which point Steven and Greg wonder what the hell's going on until all the Amethysts start snickering. And yep, what I talked about back in the hold on one second. Sorry, I was trying to remember the episode. Basically, what I thought about what I kind of got from the Amethyst in the Gem Heist episode is very much true. They're all massive trolls, and the instant that the Amethysts learned that the Amethyst that came to the zoo was a crystal gem, actually they were happy to see her. Because as I mentioned, since these Amethysts are all from Earth, they were all from the same Alpha kindergarten that our Amethyst was from. In fact, Amethyst even finds the group of Amethysts that she was supposed to pop out with, but yeah, and it turns out they were actually waiting for her to pop up. They were all excited to meet her, but they waited. But even when they kept waiting, nothing happened. So they just had to move on. So basically, they just kind of embraced her. They said they learned who she is. They welcomed her in with open arms, and they're all just super happy to see her, which just makes Amethyst really happy. And essentially, they're all just one big family. They all just love being near each other, and I love that. And I especially love that because the Amethysts are all so chill, they just go along with what our Amethyst wants, and they're helping her out, they're giving her support. And what makes it even better is that it turns out we also get to meet more gems from Earth, specifically gems from the Beta Kindergarten, as we meet a skinny Jasper who's a lot more cool and laid back than the Jasper we know, including this short little carnelian that came out of a short little rock, who it turns out is even shorter than Amethyst, or is actually taller than Amethyst, and is relishing in that fact. So basically, yeah. The Amethyst just took Steven and Greg because they were helping out the Crystal Gem Amethyst, and they just kind of wanted to mess with them a little. But either way, yeah, they have Greg, they have the Amethyst on their side, but there's still a matter of trying to get back to the other Crystal Gems and getting out of the zoo, because, well, that's still a journey in and of itself, and it immediately gets harder while everybody's celebrating, the door to the Amethyst's living quarters is opened up, and there's Holly Blue Agate with Ruby, Sapphire, and Pearl. And so immediately the Amethysts have to hide Steven and Greg, as Holly Blue immediately comes in and starts yelling at all of them because, as we talked about in the Gem Heist episode, Blue Diamond is back, and, well, Holly Blue wants to immediately start kissing her ass as soon as possible. As such, the Gems all get into arrangement, and they manage to sneak out Greg and Steven with them, though while they're being chewed up by Holly, our Amethyst tells Steven and Greg that they need to just make a run for it, which they are able to, but as they're roaming through the zoo, they end up coming across a chamber, a very large pink chamber in the zoo. And scattered around the chamber are hundreds of bubbled gems. Specifically, rose quartz gems. Yeah, as we learn later in the episode, this is actually punishment for the rose quartz. Basically, since the rose we know was the one that supposedly shattered Pink Diamond, the diamonds themselves, in their vast infinite wisdom, as we'll call it, decided that the best form of recompense was to just bubble every other rose quartz they could find because, well, one of them went rogue, so they all deserve to suffer. And, well, that's why they're all here. Of course, as we also learn later, well, the diamonds have different opinions regarding the preservation of the rose quartz gems. Blue Diamond wants to keep them around because, well, the rose quartz gems were made by Pink, and thus, while they all deserve to suffer because of what our Rose did, she's also not willing to let them go because they still remind her of her sister. Likewise with Yellow Diamond, she just wants to see them all shattered like Rose did to Pink. So it kind of comes at odds, and we'll come back to what we get from the character stuff with Blue and Yellow in the episode, which, yes, kind of thing. Yellow Diamond also appears in the episode, because while Steven and Greg are roaming around this chamber, Steven's eyes start tearing up, and he realizes Blue Diamond is close, and sure enough, she comes in and just starts kneeling down and mourning, before she's immediately followed by Yellow Diamond, who it turns out came to the zoo when she realized Blue Diamond came back, and Yellow's just trying to talk her into leaving, because, well, she's a diamond, she's got business to do, and why spend all of her time just mourning here? Of course, Blue Diamond starts getting defensive about this and doesn't want to leave, and while Yellow keeps trying to talk her into just, leaving this place, go back to her duties, and even consider getting rid of all the rose quartz gems, well, Blue's not budging. In the meantime, Steven and Greg are just doing their best to hide from the diamonds, and just by going from pillar to pillar, making sure they don't end up seeing them. But in the midst of all this, as Yellow keeps trying to console Blue, she decides the best course of action for this is to sing a song as she gets their pearls, because of course Yellow Diamond brought her pearl with her, and so Yellow orders both pearls to start playing a tune, which leads to the episode of this, or the song of this episode. Fuck, I'm getting words mixed up. Which leads to the song of this episode. What's the use of feeling blue? It's just a very, I guess I want to say cold, but also somewhat emotional song. I call it cold because the instruments playing with it are hard. They have a very metal beat. Like there's nothing really flowing with it, but it still has a good rhythm to it. But instead of feeling like soothing and calm, it feels angry and cold, which I think fits with what's going on. As the whole point of the song is Yellow trying to get Blue to essentially just forget all this. Like as the title of the song implies, what's the use of feeling Blue? The whole point of like I said, the whole point of the song is for her to just tell Blue to, well, get over it. That yes, they will always love and miss Pink, but they gotta move on. Just forget about all this. Just scrap this whole thing. What's the use of holding on to the past? It's only gonna hurt you in the end. And it's also here that we get a little bit more of Yellow's personality, because it turns out, she's also mourning. I think I probably mentioned this when we saw her first appearance, but put simply, Yellow Diamond is also mourning for Pink, but she's dealing with it in a very different manner than Blue, because while Blue is wanting to hold on to everything that Pink held dear, Yellow wants to see it all wiped from the map because she just doesn't want to think about Pink anymore. And even as the song kind of closes down, Yellow, in the midst of all this, does start getting emotional to the point where she has to step aside and actually just leans against the wall just to make sure that she doesn't break down herself. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. That was the point where I had to bring Chindy in. But anyway, yeah. As the song winds down, Yellow does get emotional, and this does actually result in Blue going over to console her. But it's at this point that the room to the chamber opens up as we see Holly Blue arriving with Sapphire, Ruby, and Pearl, although Pearl is told to stay outside. As such, Holly comes in with Ruby and Sapphire, and immediately starts getting ready to greet her diamond with absolute glory until she realizes that Yellow is there, and the ass-kissing starts going up to 11. As such, Yellow immediately asks what Holly's doing there, and Holly's here to update the diamonds that Sapphire is here to bring that human that Blue Diamond requested. To which Blue Diamond says, I didn't request a human, what's going on here? At which point, Sapphire does start freaking out a little, most likely combined with her past with Blue Diamond, as well as them being essentially right before the big bad, so you could probably crush them without a second thought. But thankfully, with Ruby right there, Sapphire is able to calm down and use the excuse that she saw that Blue Diamond would be wanting more humans with her future vision, which Blue Diamond does affirm she does want to get more humans, since after all, with the cluster on the verge of emerging, at least as far as they know, that means that the window of time for them to get more humans is slowly closing. Which Yellow says, "Oh, if that's what you want, hey, Sapphire, is the cluster emerged yet?" And Sapphire says, "No," and Yellow says, "Then there's still a chance," which will come back to bite everyone later. But for now, let's get back to this. As such, case in point, as such, Yellow and Blue dismiss Holly, Sapphire, and Ruby, and so they all leave, with Steven and Greg immediately bolting out after them. And so, once the door closes, Holly just starts gushing about how she's met how she met not only one diamond, but 2 diamonds at once. So much so that, well, she doesn't notice that the 2 humans are walking out behind her. And so the instant that the Crystal Gems have Steven and Greg, they are just doing everything in their power to hide them from Holly at every opportunity. And so as she's leading them back to the docking bay where they can get back to the roaming eye, she's all just going excited, and she's being all excited and happy, like, "Oh, I can't believe that we got 2 diamonds in one day. I thought we were all forgotten, but we saw them. Oh, and they're all so radiant," and yada yada yada, blah blah blah. She's just in pure absolute ass kissing heaven, because as they go into the docking bay, the Crystal Gems are still doing their best to hide Steven and Greg, and even when the Amethyst guarding the place see them, they just clam up too, like, "Nope, I don't see anything." But while the Gems are able to get Greg and Steven to almost in the roaming eye, it's at this point when Holly finally sees them, and she says that this is the greatest day. I don't think anything can ruin it. And at that point, that's when she sees them trying to get Steven and Greg inside. At which point, immediately her good mood goes sour as she yells, "What the hell is going on?" Of course, Sapphire immediately tries covering this up, but since Holly is still an ever-loving ass kisser, she immediately thinks that Sapphire has absolutely nothing to do with it. Clearly, this is all the fault of the incompetent rubies, to which I respond with, "Are you blind, deaf, and stupid? How are the Amethysts responsible for this? Do you just blame them for everything going wrong in this place? What happens if there's a door broken? Is it suddenly their fault too? I bet it is." But yeah, as such, Holly decides that she's going to take matters into her own hands as she ends up summoning her own weapon from her gem, which it turns out she has an electric whip, which I won't deny that's kind of awesome. But as such, as she tries attacking Steven and Greg, that's when the Crystal Gems decide, you know what, screw this, we got what we want, and go on the offensive, with Ruby and Sapphire fusing back together into Garnet, who immediately catches the whip and goes into full battle mode, as Pearl and Amethyst immediately charge in, with Pearl cutting the whip, and Amethyst grabbing the whip and using it to tie up Holly Blue, with Garnet delivering the finishing blow as she summons a gauntlet, says she's been waiting to do this all day, and uses her other hand to just lightly punch her, which causes her to fall to the ground. Immediately, Holly starts yelling at the Amethysts to grab the Crystal Gems since they're traitors, but the Amethysts are just cheering them on and saying farewell and goodbye and all that nice stuff, with Amethyst just waving goodbye back and even saying, "Amethyst for life, yo." At which point, once Holly's whip disappears, she immediately says that she'll report them all to the Diamonds, in which Pearl responds with, "Is that a good idea? Because after all, you're going to tell the Diamonds that you let a group of rebels infiltrate your base and then escape? Doesn't sound like it paints you in a good light." Which, I love that. It's essentially a damned if you do, damned if you don't moment. If she tells on the Diamonds, and if she says nothing, then she'll be responsible for having let a group of rebels escape. But if she does say something, it'll showcase just how incompetent she is for having let them get onto the base in the first place. So, again, she's just paralyzed, trapped, unable to do harm unto herself, so she just has to keep her mouth shut. What I also love is that all the amethysts on board the zoo immediately start crowding around her, and you can tell they're just getting ready to rub this in her face as much as possible. But either way, yeah. Greg is saved. The gems bid the Amethyst farewell, and thus they leave the zoo with Holly just left speechless as she realizes she's kind of fucked. As such, Greg thanks the Gems for saving him. Steven is happy to have his dad back. Greg says, "Well, I hope you're able to find what you were looking for," and Steven says, "Yeah, found you." And, well, with that little note, they both hug as the episode ends with the roaming eye warping off back to Earth. Hopefully with less gravitational shenanigans than last time, so. Alright, so my thoughts on these episodes, as well as the whole human zoo arc as in general. So, the zoo. I don't want to say I hated this episode, but I will say I disliked it. I'm not going to say there's anything technically wrong with the episode. Basically, I think from a technical standpoint, it set out exactly what it wanted to do. It set up the zoo, introduced the Zoomans, and did have some comedic hijinks with us seeing their simplistic lifestyle and living in the zoo and how it's operating, and how Stephen and Greg react to their society as they try to navigate through it, as they try and find a way out of it, which it does that well. And I guess in a sense, it's like the Adventures in Light Distortion episode. It's mostly just there for filler, as the most plot important stuff comes at the end of the episode when Stephen and Greg manage to kind of get an escape from the zoo once the Amethysts come in to corral all the Zoomans. But for the most part in the episode, we have to deal with Stephen and Greg dealing with the Zoomans. And I have to just admit it. I don't like these bastards. I don't. There is nothing technically wrong with them. They set out exactly what they're supposed to do, and there are moments when I find them endearing, especially when they're unintentionally being trolls. And spoilers, this is not the last time they're going to do that. They will appear in an episode later down the line, and there is a moment in there that immediately changes my opinion of Y6 and just makes me love him. But from the initial point of view, from this episode, I want to punch these fuckers in all of their happy-go-lucky faces. I'm sorry. I know it's just, these people are too innocent. They act too sweet. They act too nice. And I'm just looking at this and thinking, what the fuck is going on here? And I know that I'm probably swearing a lot when saying this, but I need to balance out their wholesomeness with something slightly vulgar, okay? These people are just... they're weird, and everything about them just makes me want to put them on edge, which is kind of weird for me because I do like some cutesy stuff every now and then. Yeah, my inner little boy is still active inside me and still like seeing things blow up for the sake of blowing up. I love a good action scene. You see me praise the hell out of action scenes, but I do like myself some cute stuff every now and then. I admit, I'm a brony. I love My Little Pony stuff, and yeah, that shit's adorable as hell. But these people are, but even My Little Pony had a slight edge to it. I can at least see Rainbow Dash being a bit more gritty, and they at least reacted somewhat realistically to some of the zanier aspects of their world, especially Pinkie Pie and how random she was. But the Zoomans are so freaking wholesome, so sweet. They're just so innocent. It makes me not trust them, and it just creeps me out. I look at them and I think, you're all hiding something, aren't you? And even if they aren't hiding something, I just look at them and I say, back away, thee! And I just want to grab the nearest stick and just want to point it at them like a weapon. I don't like these people. They all creep me the hell out. And I know, this is irrational and stupid, and maybe for all I know, this type of humor is what they were trying to aim for in the episode. Just having this reaction, and just having you have to see how similar how these people are, and make you go, oh my god, these people are so sheltered. But you know what? That's probably what they were going for. But I have to repeat but here's the thing. These are my vlogs, and I am here to state my opinion, and you are free to disagree with me because, well, everybody has different opinions, and while I may love Steven Universe, there are plenty of people out there who do not like the show for their own reasons. But by that same token, while they may love Steven Universe, that doesn't mean every episode his gold, and this is one of those episodes where I'm just like, oh god, this hurts. And as a result, this kind of feels like one of the low points. On a technical sense, The Zoo is not a bad episode. Nothing about it really feels offensive or wrong. It does hit the mark on what it's supposed to do. Steven and Greg act realistically, and in a way, I do like in a way, the Zoomans do make sense. They are so used to this kind of treatment because this is the world they grew up in. This is the life they all know. They have been from their perspective, their whole lives are dictated by the voices in their earrings. They just live a simplistic lifestyle. They want for nothing, and their needs are, as long as their needs are kept up with, they don't see any reason to want to leave this place. The only time that they ever feel discourse is when Greg tells them that he's not interested in being in a relationship with any of them, and as a result, they all feel hurt because they all really liked Greg. And yeah, going back to how the Zoomans do come back in later episodes, they are still bitter about Greg dumping them. Actually, they weren't. Actually, that wouldn't even be dumping. They were never in a relationship in the first place. My point is this: they're all still bitter. But again, again, that's not bad. That's not bad. And again, there is still some humor in the episode, and there is still some good humor in the episode, especially when the Zoomans are rejected. I could not help, like, as they're all crying, I just thought, oh my god, this is kind of funny. Maybe it was my sense of Schadenfreude of seeing them react like this. It's like when a little kid is rejected by their crush. They're just like, no, I liked them, and now they don't like me. And it's like, you see that throughout the episode. They're all like teenagers being consoled by their parents when the amethysts show up. It's kind of hilarious in that regard, but that still plays on me not liking these people in the first place and kind of taking some slight joy in their suffering. So, again, objectively speaking, there's nothing wrong with the episode, and I don't think there's anything inherently awful about it. The episode still does do exactly what it sets out to do, but from my personal standpoint, I hate these people. I hate the zoo, and if I could, I would take a torch to it and burn it to the ground. So there you go. That is my personal opinion. The Zoo is, on a technical standpoint, not a bad episode. It's structured well, and everything about it does work. It's just that personally, I hate these fuckers, and I'm glad that they're gone, and I hope to never see them again. So there you go. Anyway, that also leads us to That Will Be All. And this one I think is a nice finale to the arc, because now the gems have essentially sprung Greg, but now it's a matter of getting off the Zoo. And while the amethysts on board the ship may be on their side, there is still danger around every corner, because Holly Blue Agate is the one they still have to deal with, and add on the fact that now the diamonds are on board, it adds another layer of tension, especially when Steven and Greg end up in the middle of the room with all the rose quartz gems, and Yellow and Blue walk in as they get into their kind of, I want to say, minor argument about the status of the Zoo and why Blue doesn't let go, which sorry, I ate popcorn watching these episodes. But this leads to actually a really good moment in the episode that I think, well, it leads to a good moment with the villains, so to speak. One of the things that I like when you have shows with more complex characters is that the villains are not always as black and white as they are in most other shows. Now, while I'm not against having just a straight up villainous character, because it can be joy in just seeing a downright bastard of a person just going around doing evil things for the sake of doing evil things. Case in point, look up Jack Horner in the second Puss in Boots movie. But when you see that there are reasons behind why certain villains do what they do, it can kind of create a human connection to them. And we kind of get that with the diamonds. And before anyone misinterprets this, because I have to say this right now, because I know someone is going to try and think, oh, you're sympathizing with the big bads. I sympathize with them only in their grief. They are still the bad guys. They still look down on other people because they think that they're objectively better than them. They still actively trap humans because they see them as nothing more than animals to be led to the slaughter. And they are actively working to try and destroy Earth because they don't like looking at it anymore. They are not good people. They are not good people. I want to see these assholes get beaten. That is what I want. I'm just saying that what I like is that they make them more complex than just a straight up mustache twirling bad guy. And that we see that in this episode as we see Blue and Yellow Diamond mourning Pink. Because we are showcased two very different forms of grief, and it kind of corresponds well with their characters. From what we saw of Yellow Diamond and what we're further shown in this episode, Yellow Diamond is someone who mostly operates on cold, hard logic, who doesn't really try and let her emotions guide her, and is just thinking and usually just goes A goes to B and B goes to C and so on and so forth. There is a line of logic in her thinking, and likewise, she does not try to let any emotion get in the way of how she works. And thus, as a result of that, she wants to see anything associated with Pink Diamond wiped out. Because, as we see in the episode, she is emotional. Whenever she thinks about Pink Diamond, she starts losing that logic, and you start to see her break down. As we saw at the end of the "What's the Use in Feeling Blue" song, the more she started thinking about Pink, the more she started to break down, and the cold logic slipped away. And you could see that beneath it all, she was heartbroken, and that while Blue was just letting her tears flow, Yellow was doing everything in her power to hold them in, and you could just see that veneer crack just a little bit in the song, to the point where Blue had to go and offer her comfort. And as a result, you can And as a result, you can kind of see why in her grief, she wants to just skip all the steps of grief and just go to moving on. Because she doesn't want to think about Pink at all. Because she knows if she thinks about Pink, she'll get emotional and that'll get in the way of her work. So the best course of action, wipe out anything that has to do with Pink. It's part of why they put the cluster in the Earth, because not only was Earth Pink's colony, but it was also where Pink was shattered. And so as a result, she just wants it wiped off the map so she doesn't have to think about it anymore. And likewise, it's why she urges Blue Diamond to destroy all the rose quartz gems and likewise abandon the zoo. Because she, even in the song, she mentions, why do you even, like, you're keeping this place up and you're just hurting yourself because of it. And yeah, it's basically just her saying, just let this all go away, move on, and just pretend and just forget. That's what it is. And yes, in the song, she talks about, yes, we're always going to be thinking about her and we're always going to love her, but she's gone now. Just move on. That's what her mindset is. She doesn't want to think about Pink, because if she thinks about Pink, she's going to get emotional, and she doesn't want that. And it showcases that there is more to her. It showcases that there is more logic to it, and it does create it does allow you to somewhat empathize with her. Again, somewhat. It's, again, like I said, it just showcases that there's more layers to her than just the big psychotic monster who wants to kill everybody and destroy any gems that disagree with her. I'm just saying that this makes them more complex. That's all. And I like when the villains can become more complex. And likewise, we see that reflected with Blue Diamond. While Blue Diamond can have her moments of authority and hoidiness, she is more emotional when compared to Yellow. Likewise, it makes sense why she would be holding on to all these things. Why she would go to Earth to mourn Pink when she learned that the Earth was going to be destroyed by the cluster. Why she would keep the human zoo operating, and why she has still refused to shatter any of the rose quartz gems. Because they were all Pink's. She doesn't want to keep them around for their own sake. She wants to keep them around because they belong to Pink, and she wants to hold on to something to remember her by. And as a result of that decision, she refuses to let go. She lets her sorrow essentially rule her. And in a way, you can kind of see as a result, Blue and Yellow kind of operate as two extremes of the mindsets. One mindset wants to let go of the grief just completely and just forget it all exists. Well, one refuses to let go and just lets it just drape over them like a cloak, which is what Blue Diamond typically wears in most of her scenes. And as a result, you can kind of see, in a way, Blue and Yellow kind of even each other out because of it. As Yellow is able to bring Blue back to reality if she lets her emotions get too much of her, and then likewise, if Yellow gets too cold, Blue is the one to level her out and say, no, hold on, maybe we should think about this. And we kind of see that reflected in the episode, because while Yellow is the one that chews Blue out, once Yellow starts getting emotional, Blue is the one that goes over to her and starts comforting her. Again, I do kind of like this because it showcases more of what's driving our villains beyond just abject hatred towards the Earth and everything associated with it. There are reasons behind their actions. It's part of why Blue kidnapped Greg. It's why she's still keeping the human zoo running. She's not just doing this for the sake of being a bitch. There are reasons behind it. And again, I like when the villains can be complex like that they're not just straight cookie cutter black and white supervillains, that there can be a few shades of gray, but very dark gray. Like I said, these are still the bad guys, and they are still doing very terrible things. They are still the ones holding these humans captive, and they still see nothing wrong with blowing up the planet, and that's, yeah. Although, like I said, there is still something going on, because again, going back to that scene with Sapphire, when she talks about how the Earth has not been destroyed yet, Yellow says that there's still a chance when Blue mentions that she wants to preserve some of the species on Earth. And yeah, like I said, that will come back to bite the crystal gems later, and I do kind of like that. Just a hint of what's going to happen, and well, without really revealing anything, it is somewhat Steven's fault. With that being said, though, it is still a nice satisfactory finale towards the human zoo arc, because they do manage to get Greg out of there. We do get some more stuff going on with the villains as they go along, and I do like that we get to see more of the Amethyst. And yes, the fact that Amethyst meets her, I'm just gonna say, sisters when she arrives at the zoo, it helps her character a lot, because in later episodes we see that her mental state does a lot better, because, well, the Amethysts were happy to see her. They were excited to finally meet her. They embraced her wholeheartedly, and even were willing to kind of abandon their duties just to help her out because they liked her, because they genuinely liked her. Even despite the fact that they know that the crystal gems are traitors who have abandoned Homeworld, they're just like, oh yeah, whatever. Hey, you want to pull this prank on your friends? And yeah, they just go with it. I like that. It's kind of nice. It showcases more of not only how Amethyst operate, but it also leads to some nice, good character stuff along the way. Hold on a sec. Chindi came in, and so as a result, it's just kind of some nice fun stuff. And I do like that by the end of the episode, they're actively cheering for the crystal gems when they leave the zoo, and just mocking Holly Blue as she just realizes how screwed she really is in this scenario. It's fun, and yes, it is funny seeing Holly Blue just kind of get her comeuppance, because the entire time she's been in these episodes, she's just been arrogant, haughty, and just looks down at everyone below her to the point where she thinks the Amethysts are responsible for everything wrong. Going back to the Gem Heist episode, when Ruby accidentally burnt one of burning footprints into the human zoo door, immediately Holly thought that Amethyst were responsible, and even when she catches Sapphire, Ruby, and Pearl trying to smuggle out Steven and Greg, she immediately thinks it's the Amethyst's fault. Like, how in denial are you, lady? How high is your head up your own ass? It's just so dumb, but also kind of funny. It makes it cathartic when she actually gets her ass handed to her, and Pearl even delivers the coup de grace with saying, go ahead, tell them we were here. It'll showcase how incompetent you were. I love that. It's fun. It's amusing. And by the end of the episode, it does lead to some nice, wholesome stuff, as Steven is glad to just have his dad back. It's nice. It's fun. It adds more layers to the villains and their arc. It does hint at more stuff to come, while also having some entertaining moments in there thrown in with the Amethyst. So on the whole, I do think That Will Be All is a good episode, and I think the zoo arc is fun because of it, as it not only continues introducing more layers to the threats the crystal gems will be facing with the introduction of Blue Diamond, but also allows us to kind of explore more of the gem society. And when we go to the zoo, meet the Amethyst, see the zoo and how it operates, while also hinting at more future, and while also giving us more character stuff with Steven, giving us some nice little character stuff with Amethyst, and finally having a fun resolution as Steven is reunites with his dad, while also giving us some nice little space stuff as we get to explore more of the zoo. So, on the whole, it's a good arc. And as for these episodes, the zoo, objectively not awful, but I personally don't like it for my own reasons. Well, That Will Be All is a nice, fun little finale that brings everything together, while also still laying down the hints for future episodes. So, yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week as we look at the epilogue for these episodes. And, well, as we not only see what Connie and co were doing on Earth while the gems were off doing this, but also see Steven kind of dealing with some more of his own inner turmoil. So, till then, hope you have a good night. I'm Samuel Johnson. Chindi is over here, and I'll see you next week. Take care.